I haven't left the flat in 3 days. It isn't because the door is locked, or because I am physically unable to turn the handle, but rather because I know with absolute certainty that the Ring doorbell will log my departure at exactly 14:03. The geofence alert will ping his phone at 14:04, and by 14:06 he will text asking where I am going. The smart lock will timestamp my exit to the second. The shared calendar will show no appointments to justify the movement, and I have run out of explanations that I haven't already used. I stand in the hallway now, holding my phone and watching the battery percentage drop to 73%, knowing that in 2 hours it will hit 20, and Tom will text asking why I haven't charged it, reminding me that a dead phone means no location sharing, and that he worries when he cannot see me. Through the open doorway of the living room, I can see the Ring app open on his laptop, the timeline scrolling back through the week like a digital film of my existence, documenting me leaving for work, me returning, and me taking the bins out on Tuesday night at 21:47, exactly when the calendar said I would. I look at my reflection in the hallway mirror and see a woman who looks tired and thinner than she used to be, with hair that needs washing because the calendar has been full, every slot accounted for, every hour designated for something Tom decided we needed to do together. I realize I don't recognize myself anymore, and I wonder when my life became a schedule I didn't write. The first time I saw Tom properly was across a mahogany consultation table at Herbert Smith, where I was mid-argument with their IT director about our firm's catastrophic server migration. I was a senior associate at a mid-sized commercial firm, not quite a partner yet, but close enough to feel the pressure of it, and we had hired an external company to handle our data migration, only for it to become a disaster of lost files and corrupted backups. The IT director had spent 20 minutes insisting it was our fault for not following protocols we had never been told about, while Tom sat quietly working on his laptop. When the shouting reached its peak, Tom simply turned his screen around and pulled up a diagram that made everyone else in the room look incompetent, explaining in a calm, matter-of-fact voice that our authentication protocol contradicted our backup sequence, which was why we were losing data every 48 hours. He pointed out the specific sections of code where the system was creating a loop, stating clearly that this was an architectural failure, not a user error. He fixed the entire issue in a week, and when I asked him for coffee the day after he completed the migration, he said yes immediately, looking at me as if he had been waiting for me to ask. On our second date, he didn't just suggest a restaurant. He brought up a shared Google note on his phone with options organized by Michelin stars, cuisine type, and proximity to the tube, including estimated costs and booking requirements for each. He apologized for it being a bit much, explaining that he hated the indecision of choosing a place to eat, but I found it endearing and charming after years of dating men who couldn't decide on a pub without a committee meeting. Tom had systems for everything, from the alphabetized spice rack in his Battersea flat to a calendar that color-coded his work, gym, and admin in a way that actually made sense. When I mentioned my kitchen drawer full of tangled chargers, he came over the next weekend with cable ties and a small plastic organizer, kneeling on my kitchen floor to separate the lightning cables from the USB-C ones. He told me I didn't have to thank him, explaining that he liked fixing things and that it was simply how his mind worked. He held up 2 identical white cables to show me the difference, telling me that if I labeled them, I would never grab the wrong one again, and then he looked up at me with a smile that made me feel like I was the only chaos in the world worth organizing. 3 months into the relationship, we were eating Vietnamese delivery at his kitchen table when he suggested the Ring doorbell. I had mentioned missing another parcel that week. The 3rd time that month I had found a missed delivery card despite being home, and he said he had a spare camera from his old flat that he could install at mine. He framed it as a practical kindness, saying I would get alerts when anyone came to the door, and would be able to see them before they knocked, which would make him feel better, knowing I wasn't answering the door to strangers. I remembered a man who had knocked the previous month claiming to be from the water company, and how vulnerable I had felt when he left quickly after I asked for ID, so I agreed that it made sense. Tom fitted it the following Saturday, syncing it to both our phones and showing me how to review the timeline and adjust the motion zones. He even tilted the camera angle slightly downward to catch package thieves who might crouch below the sightline, demonstrating how I could scroll back through the whole day to see every person who walked past. When my grocery delivery arrived that evening, we both received the notification simultaneously and watched on our phones as the driver stacked the bags. Tom squeezed my hand and told me that now I would never miss anything, and that he could check for me if I was at work, which felt like being looked after by a partner who genuinely paid attention. The location sharing started casually about 6 months in, framed as a helpful solution to a problem I hadn't realized was serious. I had grabbed the wrong keys one morning while rushing to catch my train, taking his car keys instead of mine since they looked identical. He texted me at lunchtime asking if I had them, and when I apologized and promised to drop them back, he told me not to worry but suggested we set up Find My, so we would always know where things were, adding that he was always losing his wallet. I accepted the invite without thinking, seeing it as an efficient backup for my own tendency to lose things like my Oyster card or work pass. That weekend, while Tom was visiting his mother in Essex, I went to see a film with my friend Leah. When I came out of the cinema, I had 3 texts from him asking how the film was, noting that I was in Hackney when he thought I was meeting Leah in Soho, and finally asking if I was okay. I called him immediately, and he sounded confused rather than angry, explaining that he had seen I was in Hackney and thought something had happened or that I had to leave suddenly. He admitted he had been worried enough to consider calling hospitals. I felt terrible for worrying him and apologized, and he suggested in a soft, vulnerable voice that maybe I could just text him if plans changed so he wouldn't panic when he saw me somewhere unexpected. It seemed like a reasonable request from someone who cared about my safety, so I started texting him my movements, updates about popping to the pharmacy, grabbing lunch, or stopping for petrol. He always replied immediately, thanking me for letting him know, and I told myself it was thoughtful, not noticing when it stopped being optional. Tom moved in that October, a process that happened gradually until his name was on the bills, and his mother was asking when we would buy a place together. He suggested a shared calendar to avoid double booking, explaining that it made sense to coordinate our client dinners and social events now that we were living together. I synced it, and within a week he had added all my appointments, color-coded into his system, along with things I hadn't mentioned, like reminders to renew my car tax or blocks of time for meal prep. He told me he thought it would be nice to have structure so we weren't just ships passing in the night, and I agreed because we had been missing each other with our busy schedules. Next came the smart lock, which he pitched as a solution to me digging for keys in my bag. He set my code as my birth year and his as his mother's birthday, explaining that the app logged every entry for security so we would know if anyone tried to get in. Then came the geofence alerts, which pinged him when I was 5 minutes away so he could time dinner perfectly. I walked in one Tuesday to find him serving pasta just as I crossed the threshold, telling me with a smile that this was efficiency. Our lives became a shared map of dots moving around London, always visible and accounted for, which felt intimate at the time, like we were always together even when we were apart. One evening in late October, my colleague Priya asked if I wanted to get a drink after work to discuss some issues she was having with her landlord. I checked the calendar and saw Tom was out at a client dinner, but I texted him anyway to check if it was okay. He replied telling me to have fun, but asked me to share my live location on WhatsApp so he would know I was safe getting home. I enabled it without thinking, wanting him not to worry. At 9:45, while I was finishing a glass of wine with Priya, he texted asking if I was still in Shoreditch. I replied that I was heading home soon, and he said there was no rush. But I left 10 minutes later anyway, telling Priya I had an early start. I told myself it was because I was tired, not because I felt his eyes on the map watching my stationary dot. When I got home, he already had the ring footage queued up, showing me arriving. He asked if I had a good catch-up and told me I looked happy, but then asked if I had walked the canal path. When I said yes, he told me it wasn't safe at night and asked me to take the main road next time for him. I agreed, interpreting his surveillance as protective love. Tom started mentioning safety more frequently in November, not with strict rules, but with small observations that accumulated like sediment. He commented one morning that Priya always kept me out late, pointing out on the ring timeline that I hadn't returned until nearly 11 the previous week. When I said we were just talking, he said he knew but that he worried about me being in Shoreditch at night, mentioning a stabbing he had seen on the news. He kissed my forehead and told me that I had done that journey 100 times before I had someone who cared, framing his anxiety as a luxury I hadn't possessed before. I noticed the comment, and the next time Priya texted, I suggested lunch in the city instead, somewhere I could be back at my desk by 2 with my location dot exactly where it should be. When my sister called wanting to meet for her birthday on a Saturday afternoon, Tom checked the calendar and told me we had a farmer's market in the morning and a booking at the South Bank Christmas market at 4. He showed me the entry, claiming I had said I wanted to go 2 weeks ago and that he had written it down so we wouldn't forget. I didn't remember saying it, but I had been distracted lately, so I asked if we could move it since it was her birthday. He went quiet and looked hurt, saying he thought we were prioritizing us and building our life, but that he would cancel if that was what I wanted. The silence in the kitchen felt enormous, and rather than disappoint him, I texted my sister to say I couldn't make it. At Christmas drinks with my friends, I mentioned how organized and thoughtful Tom was, describing how he had transformed my flat. Leah remarked that alphabetizing a spice rack wasn't normal, calling it controlling. The table went quiet, and later at the bar Leah told me I seemed different, quieter, constantly checking my phone and leaving events early. She asked if something was wrong, reminding me I could talk to her, but I could feel my phone in my pocket and knew the geofence alert would trigger when I left the pub. I told her everything was fine and left 20 minutes later, not texting her for 3 weeks afterwards. When she invited me for New Year's, I told her Tom had already booked a cottage in the Cotswolds, which was true according to the calendar, even though I hadn't known about it until it appeared there. A calendar entry appeared on a Tuesday morning in mid-January for a therapy consultation that evening at a clinic I had never heard of. When I asked Tom about it, he claimed I had added it the previous week, saying I wanted to talk to someone about work stress. He showed me the entry on his phone, which stated it was created by me at 23:47 on a Tuesday. I was certain I hadn't added it as I was always asleep by 11, but he gently suggested I might have done it half asleep, listing other things I had supposedly forgotten recently, like leaving the hob on or asking about dinner plans twice. He offered to come with me, but I cancelled it, though the doubt remained. I started wondering if I was losing time or losing myself. The ring footage started feeling different too. He would cue up clips of me leaving for work, asking why I looked stressed or why I had stopped on the path for so long. One evening, he waited in the hallway when I returned from Tesco, telling me I had been gone an hour and 12 minutes for milk. He showed me the geofence and ring time stamps, pointing out a 72-minute trip and an 8-minute gap where my location stopped sharing. He correctly identified my battery had been at 43%, dismissing my claim that the phone died. He told me softly that he wasn't accusing me of anything, but that he noticed patterns, and I had been unpredictable lately. I lay awake that night, trying to reconstruct exactly what I had done in the car park, unable to account for the minutes he had counted. I began narrating my life in real time inside my head, constructing alibis before I needed them. I would mentally note that a stop for coffee was a 10-minute variance, or that a road closure caused a 4-minute delay. I rehearsed conversations and checked the calendar multiple times before committing to anything. When I opened the door, Tom would already have the ring footage paused, and I knew he had watched my commute, my posture, and my variances. I started leaving work exactly on time and taking the same route, texting updates without being asked because it was easier than explaining. In February, at a pub with his colleagues, I told a story about a judge falling asleep during a tribunal, and Tom interrupted to correct me, saying it was the Johnson case, not the Henderson one. When I insisted it was Henderson, he told the group I was confused, and that all my cases blurred together because I worked too hard. Later in the Uber, I told him he had made me look stupid, but he maintained he was just trying to help because I seemed confused. We sat in silence for the rest of the journey. One Saturday, Leah invited me to brunch, but Tom pointed out a conflict with my Pilates class and a car service booking. When I said I could skip Pilates, he looked disappointed, reminding me that I always said it was the only thing that helped my back, and that if I skipped it, I would be in pain by Wednesday. He told me he was trying to protect me from myself, but gave me permission to go if I wanted, his tone clearly indicating it was a test. I told Leah I couldn't make it. That night I tried to discuss needing more flexibility and autonomy, but Tom went completely still and then withdrew into silence. He stopped speaking to me, ate dinner on the sofa, and came to bed only after I was asleep. The silence lasted 3 days until I apologized on the 4th morning, saying I felt like I couldn't breathe without checking in. He hugged me tightly, crying, and told me he loved me so much it scared him, that he couldn't bear the thought of me being unsafe. The relief was dizzying, and when he added a note to the calendar about discussing boundaries, I never brought it up again. I found the spreadsheet on a Wednesday in early March while Tom was away on an overnight trip to Birmingham. I was looking for insurance documents in our shared drive folder on his laptop when I found a subfolder titled Optimization Protocol. Inside was a spreadsheet with 5 tabs. The first, Movement Analysis, contained 6 months of data logging every departure, arrival, and variance, with notes flagging inconsistencies and suspicious behaviour, including the Tesco trip he had labelled as deliberate deception. The second tab, Social Network Risk, listed my friends and family with risk scores and intervention strategies. Leah was marked red with a strategy of scheduling conflicts and gradual withdrawal, while my sister was yellow. The third tab, Compliance Tracking, graphed my adherence to his routines, noting that my resistance incidents were decreasing and I was on track for full integration by June. The fourth tab contained communication scripts with pre-written responses for gaslighting me and framing his control as love. The final tab was a draft email written in my voice to my friends and family, stating I was taking space to focus on my relationship, scheduled to send automatically the following Monday. My hands shook as I read the files. The laptop screen dimmed, and I moved the mouse, triggering a ring notification on the screen. Motion detected. I checked the time. It was 15:47. I opened the app and saw the empty hallway, but the alerts kept coming. I checked the settings and saw the motion sensitivity was set to maximum to detect shadows or light changes, with notifications sent directly to Tom. He knew I was home. He knew I wasn't moving. And he knew I was on his laptop. I looked at the spreadsheet again and saw the latest entry for that day, noting his absence and setting the monitoring to maximum. I closed the laptop, stood up on unsteady legs, and walked to the door. I opened it, knowing the camera would log the action and send the alert to Birmingham. I stared into the lens for 3 seconds, then went back inside, packed my suitcase, and left. I changed the smart lock code, deleted his access, and called my sister, leaving his keys on the table. I have been at my sister's for 12 days now. Tom has sent 68 texts, 31 calls, and letters explaining that the spreadsheet was just his way of understanding me and keeping me safe. He claims everything he did came from love and begs me to come home. I haven't replied. I have disabled location sharing, changed all my passwords, bought a new phone, and removed his access to everything. My sister asked no questions and gave me her spare room. Leah came over yesterday and cried when she saw me, and I showed her the screenshots of the spreadsheet. Halfway through talking to her, I checked my watch to calculate if I would make it back in time, before remembering that no one is tracking me anymore. I am looking for a studio flat next week, somewhere small without smart locks or cameras, just a door I can open without wondering who is watching. The estate agent looked at me strangely when I said I wanted somewhere I could forget my keys without it becoming evidence, somewhere I could be 10 minutes late and have it just be traffic. This morning I walked to the shop without my phone, didn't tell anyone, bought milk, and stood outside feeling the spring air. No one knew where I was, and for the first time in months, nothing needed explaining. It felt like freedom.